Hello, my name is Dr. Geoffrey Bird. I'm with the School of Communication and Culture at Royal Roads University. I'm involved with work to do with war heritage, and over the past 6 years, I've been involved with making films about sites of memory, mostly in Canada, but overseas. Everything from Japanese Canadian internment, Ukrainian internment in the First World War, conscientious objectors, as well as various military stories that connect Canada to the world wars. So when we think about historical events that are being discussed currently, I think we look back particularly to the 20th century, but we can also look earlier. Certainly the discussion on colonization has come to the fore with the revisiting of everything from slavery to settlement in North America. But we can also look at issues around racism, and particularly that has resulted in genocide and other policies that have either been aimed at eradicating certain groups of people or marginalizing them. So I think when we look across the scope of North America and Europe and what is controversial these days in terms of historical events, we can see everything from nations' past, race, and identity. I think controversy is part of commemoration. I don't think there's ever a situation where we can have a purity of no politics. And of course, when we think about how we interpret the past, there'll often be a situation where we have multiple interpretations. And the challenge becomes when we try to commemorate is we try to simplify something down to the point where we create enough consensus that allows us to commemorate without too much politics. But in that way, we begin to forget and silence certain elements of the narrative. So I think we have to be ready to embrace controversy in commemoration. In terms of how we commemorate, I think that there's different ways to consider this question. What are we trying to commemorate is one question, but and how, but also why. And I would say with the why, we are trying to achieve a situation where we're learning from the past in order to not see it occur again, as a reminder to us of how evil can take on societies and prevail. And how evil comes out of big problems we face, and often people stepping forward with simple solutions. And these lead to some of the most controversial and traumatic moments of the 20th century. So how do we commemorate that? Well, one of the most interesting ones I've seen recently is in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. A particular park has just recently unveiled a mirror, quite a simple memorial, but in a way, a very powerful way of commemorating. Because, of course, when we step into the park and we're trying to remember 1940s Netherlands occupied, in this particular park, Jews were not allowed in it. And so rather than a simple plaque that tells that story, the idea is to get people to reflect on their own position on this topic and their own role in preventing it from happening again. And I think that's an example of something which engages people and gets them to think about their role today. And that is, I think, one of the critical elements in good commemoration, is to figure out ways to engage contemporary viewers, contemporary citizens in a manner that makes them feel that they can do something. I think we're seeing these days is the past being mobilized by different politicians and political parties in order to justify their actions today. And the danger is the oversimplification of history, and history being used as a weapon to weaponize a certain perspective. And sometimes these pieces of history are almost like a mythological element that are taken for granted that they are true, and then they're just essentially repeddled and reframed to support a certain perspective. So, for example, we're seeing a lot of right-wing parties in North America are able to draw on the past and to really reflect on it in a very simple way, to try to justify it as part of the national identity or as something that needs to be protected in some way. So, for example, gun rights in the United States, we're seeing that as an issue in the past little while, where that topic comes up about individuals being allowed to protect themselves, as well as to, if necessary, fight against the state. And in these little seeds of how the past is reinterpreted for present day purposes, we see the seeds of the potential not only decay of a country, but also its ruin, perhaps through civil war in the future, or maybe international conflict. So I think these are the worries that we have with contemporary politics. And again, we can see these clashes along lines of identity, race, as well as at the nation state level. Finding the common ground while talking about traumatic pasts often involves trying to bring it into the present and trying to figure out something we're trying to do to make the present better. If we are simply trying to come to agreement on what happened in the past, that can take time, and can also be something that is debated from generation to generation. And so the common ground really is about how we take these historical experiences and use them to understand what's happening in the present. And I think often when we think of commemoration, we think of a looking back in time, whereas maybe we should start looking at commemoration as a way to actively look at the present and things we need to do in order to make the future better. Certainly the education system has a strong role to play in this narrative and in the ongoing discourse. Obviously, places like universities provide an opportunity where these topics can be discussed and debated, but at the same time, the education system needs to find a way of reaching out to the broader community, because I think sometimes the university is part of the challenge, because we run the risk, as we always have, of being scholars in an ivory tower that is separate and removed from the day-to-day experiences of people who aren't part of the education elite. So what do we need to do? Well, my thought is that we should look at how we present our scholarship work, our research, and find ways to present it in a manner that reaches out to the general public. Efforts like the conversation, which is shorter articles that are accessible to the public, I think is a good step forward, but also to using mediums such as podcasts and film as a way to share ideas and to engage with the general public. This, I think, is the important step forward that we need to take in order that we don't isolate the good work of the education system from the needs of the general public.